Hey there, everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of our Talk is Cheap Giants podcast from NJ Advanced Media, the Star Ledger, NJ.com. Daryl Slater here. And we actually have a different co host this time. We'll get to that in a minute. But obviously, the Giants coming off Sunday's tie against Washington 20-20. Weird game, weird ending. Puts the Giants here at 7-4-1 with 5 games to play. Next up, the 11-1 Eagles at MetLife Stadium. Huge challenge for the Giants, and but really they sit it's number 6 in the playoff pecking order. The second of 3 wild cards, just ahead of Seattle, which is 7-5. Washington in the 8th spot at 7-5-1. Washington now off this week. The Giants go there for Sunday Night Football in 2 weeks, so that game will loom large. Regardless of what happens Sunday against the Eagles, we'll see if the Giants can pull off the massive upset. So the Giants still in the playoff mix. A lot to discuss here about the Giants' playoff hopes, about their offense, about Odell Beckham. But first, we'll welcome in Steve Politi, our esteemed columnist, because the Giants have a rookie head coach, they have a rookie general manager, and now on the beat they have a rookie grandfather. Bob Brookover's daughter gave birth to a baby girl Sunday morning, so he was not at the game. He's going to be spending some time with his family this week, so Steve joins us. What's going on, man?
Thanks, Daryl. Appreciate it. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. Probably better than Brian Dable right now.
Yeah, that goes without saying. Yeah, I'm thinking about this 25 years covering sports in this area. I don't think I've ever covered a tie. That was the first time I've ever seen that happen in an NFL game, and I hope it's the last time. It's really unsatisfying for everyone involved. That was my takeaway.
Yeah, and you had to do our at the gun at the end post, and you didn't look like you were enjoying that.
No, it was not, especially when it changes and they blow the lead. Yeah, it was. I don't think I'm sure there's no good ties in the NFL, but for the Giants having a touchdown lead that late in the game, having a 4th down deep in Washington territory, giving up that touchdown so quickly, I think that one had to feel more like a loss than anything else.
For sure, and that was sort of the tone in the locker room afterwards. I mean, this Giants team is now there was a missed opportunity for sure to get an important win. They're 1-3-1 since their 6-1 start, historic 6-1 start, best start for a first-year Giants head coach in 93 years, and now 1-3-1, and they're facing a tough challenge Sunday. But I think we can dissect so many reasons why the Giants, quote unquote, lost/tied that game on Sunday. But their offense, well, we'll get to the 4th and 3 in a minute, but just their big picture offense. Geez, I mean, the second half, what happened? They just fell off a cliff offensively.
Yeah, I mean, I just wonder how much of it is they're becoming the team that we thought they would be. Yeah. Saquon Barkley still has had a brilliant year, but there's just really not any weapons in this passing game. Darius Slayton, if he gets hurt, this team is basically a wishbone offense at this. I know that's an exaggeration, but there's really just nothing to speak of playmaker wise. And Slayton is a 50-50 proposition sometimes with some of the passes. He made one great reception, a 55-yard catch early in the game. That was really the only big play the Giants had. And then in the second half, he had that one drop that was huge. You could tell that they didn't have a lot of confidence in the Giants passing game. And then there was that weird sequence at the end of the 4th quarter when they went long a couple of times, only took 19 seconds off the clock. I just thought they were out of sync in the second half of that game. They got away from what they were doing well. And this is a team that can't afford that. They don't have a lot of margin for error offensively.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, super thin margin for error. I mean, if you look at this is a team that coming into this year, if we can rewind to really almost like exactly 3 months ago before the season started, they were supposed to have their outside receivers are going to be Kenny Golladay and Kadarius Toney, and then Wan'Dale Robinson in the slot, and then Sterling Shepard helping out, as the number 3/4. He could play outsider in the slot. Obviously, Robinson done for the year, Shepard done for the year, Toney's traded to the Chiefs, Kenny Golladay a non-factor, and he was sick on Sunday anyway, and he's been passed over by Isaiah Hodgins of all people.
Yeah,
so
it's amazing.
The Giants are rolling with this is crazy. I mean, they're rolling with Darius Slayton, Isaiah Hodgins, and Richie James.
Right. You can make the argument they had the weakest receiver core in the league when they were healthy. You can make that argument, and now when you look at it, it is just sort of remarkable what Daniel Jones has had to work with. Give him credit. I mean, he was 13 of 14. He didn't throw his first incomplete pass other than a spike until the final 2 minutes of the game. I mean, he did with what he had. He was pretty accurate. He had the one fumble that was, again, that's a problem he's had in the past, but it certainly has not been a bad issue with turnovers this year. But yeah, I mean, there's just no playmakers. There's nobody on this offense. I mean, your stat is amazing. They have gone 40 straight games without scoring 30 points. I mean, think about that. In this modern NFL, it's just insane.
It's truly insane. I mean, and they will need to. Joe Shane obviously needs to figure out this wide receiver situation going in. They may have like all new receivers except for Wan'Dale Robinson going into next year, and who knows when he's going to be healthy, coming off the torn ACL. And yeah, 40 straight games without scoring 30 points. They did it in Week 5 of 2020, a loss to the Cowboys. The Giants are actually 17, 22-1 in those games, and then. If you go back even further, they've hit 30 just one time in 46 games.
Wow.
Wow. They did it back-to-back games end of 2019. And so in those 46, they're 17, 28-1, which I think is a better encapsulation of like how hard it is to win when you don't
of course.
score.
Yeah, of course.
And yeah. I mean, so it makes sense, I think, when you hear Brian Daboll say yesterday he's asked, is he considering demoting Mike Kafka? And, his answer was no, but if you read between the lines, it's Mike Kafka is not the biggest problem here, guys.
Right. Yes. And I think you could see some of the frustration. Brian Daboll's been good with the media for the most part. I get the sense that he was dying to grab the microphone after that game and say, look, yeah, of course I didn't have confidence in my offense in overtime. Have you been watching my offense? I mean, there was a moment like I would have liked you can't handle the truth. He could have gotten Colonel Jessup on us there for a while. Yeah, I mean, that's what happened in this game. This is a guy who was uber aggressive in Week 1, going for the 2-point conversion against Tennessee. And I think he sized it up in overtime. He's got a 4th and 3 from the Washington 45, looked at the options and said, look, if we try to go for this, we're going to lose this game. I think that's what he thought. And reality has turned him from an aggressive coach to, in that situation, a conservative coach.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned they're 4th and 3. Washington 45, and with 142 left in overtime, and they line up, and we're thinking, okay, maybe they're going to go for it. It turns out they just take a delay game to move it back, and they punt it down to the Washington 10, and it winds up being a game that preserves their half win, their tie, because they or a decision, I should say, because they do pin Washington deep, and that was Washington had no chance after that, but. Do you think you wrote about it after, coming out of the game, it's a reflection of his obviously lack of confidence in the offense, but what does it say about, Daniel Jones? I mean, if you have a quarterback who you really trust, regardless of your supporting cast, and you're in Washington territory in that situation, do you think, don't you think you should take that shot, or how do you feel?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I wrote. And a lot of fans say, well, it's not that he doesn't trust Jones. He doesn't trust his line. He doesn't trust his receivers. And I get that. I totally understand that. But yeah, if you have Josh Allen, do you care who your line is? Do you care who the receivers are? I mean, I guess that's an extreme example, but certainly, look around the league. There are probably 10 quarterbacks in the league where that they certainly would have gone for that in that situation. Yeah, I mean, you play to win. You don't play to tie. And I think that your best chance, if you want to win the game, your best chance was 4th and 3 at the 45. And I understand if you don't get it, that you really risk, you put your team in a position to lose. But if you punt it, then they were lucky to get the ball back, and I guess it worked out the way he wanted it to. They got the ball back with about 30 seconds left. They drove into Washington territory for a 58-yard field goal that missed. But yeah, I mean, their best shot at winning that game was right there, and I think that was a pretty clear message from Brian Daboll about how he felt about his quarterback.
And honestly, though, like you alluded to it, I feel like Daniel Jones has earned the benefit of the doubt. Right? I mean, he's played reasonably steadily this year. He's played pretty well in that game. So, if you don't trust him in that spot, considering how he was playing in the game and considering he's been pretty competent this year, then are you ever going to trust this guy? That's what I kind of wonder.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Yeah, and it's just funny. We've gotten this far into this year. Like this was the evaluation year on Daniel Jones, where you were going to look at this and say, okay, is he our franchise quarterback? Are we going to put the franchise tag on him? Are we going to give him the big money? I'm not sure that we think we've gotten this far in without having the answer. And it's just pretty, I mean, it's certainly very interesting to me. And part of that is certainly not his fault. It's the players around him. We still haven't seen him with really effective cast of weapons, and we're not going to. So it just makes it interesting how this team is going to evaluate him going forward. But yeah, I mean, I would have loved just for that reason alone, forget the outcome of the game, forget everything else. I would have just loved to see what he would have done there, just to see if that is part of, okay, when you go into the offseason, you're thinking about what Daniel Jones is, what kind of player he is. Well, I mean, that would have been nice to have that piece of information. What does he do in that situation?
For sure. And, I think the thing you just articulated there, you wrote a column about it even before the season. Hey, yes, this is an evaluation year for Daniel Jones, but he's not going to have a perfect supporting cast around him. I mean, that they're going to have to evaluate him with a flawed group around him in terms of protection and playmakers. And it's even become more of an extreme than what we all thought, like, in terms of, the attrition that they've endured. So it was so bad yes, that was a chance for them to win the game, but they certainly had chances in the second half. I mean, they score a touchdown on their first drive of the half. They're getting the ball off a fumble. But then this is what they netted yard-wise on their next 4 drives. 9, -5, -2, and then 0.
No, jeez. Yeah.
And the -2 drive being the John Feliciano taunting, and then Washington goes and marches 90 yards right after that drive. I mean, the defense had to be gassed, of course.
Yep. And that was a bad break, that penalty. And I certainly don't think it was – but Dable's his answer was you can't even allow them to think that you're doing it. So, but still, that was a bad call. Shouldn't have been flagged for that. He was clearly celebrating with his teammate. But I mean that's what happens in the NFL these days. You can't put yourself in that position.
So the Giants kind of are where they are offensively, and they have 5 games left here to try to get this thing sorted out and to try to make the playoffs. And you'd think probably if they win 2 more games, that would put them at effectively 9.5 wins. And I think that should be enough. I mean, they can beat the Colts, I would think. But if you look at how the defenses that they're going to play coming up, in terms of PFF ratings, the Eagles, by the way, the Giants are 25th in offense and 29th in defense in PFF. So the fact that they're even in this position is pretty remarkable.
It's remarkable, yeah.
But the Eagles at this point are 3rd in PFF in terms of defense, and then they're 2nd in offense. They're a ridiculously good team. So the Giants have to play the Eagles twice in the final 5. But in terms of the other defenses they have to play, Commanders are 13th, and you saw it. The Giants almost won a low-scoring game there against the Commanders. The Vikings are 6th, and the Colts, even though they're not that good, are 11th in defense. So there's some tests coming up for this Giants offense in terms of the defenses they're going to play. And so as this group tries to figure out some solutions, how do you weigh, and they've already made their pitch to Odell Beckham, but how do you weigh Odell Beckham in all this?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you don't, and I go back to this. Like I think about what he was when he was with the Rams. He was half the player he was when he was with the Giants earlier. Still a very serviceable, good, a top level wide receiver. He would be the Giants' best wide receiver when he walked on the field. But that player now is coming off another ACL tear. I just don't know. Yeah, I just don't know how you can expect anything from him this season. So and Beckham is looking for more than 1 year. So if you're Joe Schoen, you've got to look at this. All right, well, where am I in building this team? I'm not in a situation where I plug in a guy who's a number 2, number 3 receiver right now, and as an extra target for the quarterback to win a championship. He is several. We've just talked about it. He is several pieces away from getting to that point. And I wouldn't want to tie up the money that he's going to want into the contract. There's the added side of just the bringing that level of attention. And even though he's not the circus that he was early in his career when he's younger, he's matured. I get all that too, but he just sucks so much life out of everything else, that I'm not sure where the Giants are right now, what they're building, and the kind of culture they're creating there under Brian Daboll, that you would want that. I just don't think that. I don't think it works for the Giants. I don't think it works for Odell. I mean, he's a win now player. Is he really going to come here and want all the pressure that's going to be put on him to be a number 1 receiver? He's not a number 1 receiver. So yeah, I would just hard pass on Odell.
Those are great points all, and I'm sure that Joe Schoen, in terms of like when you say hard pass, it's like probably hard pass on what Odell wants and what the Cowboys are going to be able to pay because they have more roster wiggle room than the Giants. So I'm sure Joe Shane say, "Oh yeah, if you want to come here for the minimum for the rest of the year, we'll take you." But I mean,
Of
that's
course,
just not
sure. Like he
realistic.
doesn't want that though. Yeah, that's
No
the
doubt.
problem.
I mean, the other point Bob brought it up last week is, Odell last year and last season had Cooper Kupp to play off of. He was not the number one receiver. So a lot of the production
Right.
that he was able to put together in the playoffs, perhaps resulted from the fact that he had a really good receiver opposite him, and the Giants just don't have that this year. And Joe Shane, as you said, they have holes all over the place, not just on offense. I mean, they have to figure out a lot of their issues, especially in the secondary at their cornerback opposite of Dory Jackson, or is Dory Jackson back next year? All these things that Joe Shane has to sort out with. Yes, he does have more cap room next year, but some of that could go to Daniel Jones and or Saquon Barkley. So there's all these moving pieces for Joe Shane. Whereas, look, Jerry Jones, by the way, you talked about, getting older. Odell will be 31 in next November. So you see
Yeah.
receivers, he's 30 now. You see receivers decline at that point. Jerry Jones, is he in the pushes chips in the middle of the table? Yes, of course he is. The man's 80 years old.
Right. And the team's pretty good. I mean, yeah, it's another
It's like
reason.
go
Sure.
win another Super Bowl before, he heads off to eternity. you
Right.
know? I,
Yes, eternity with a bag of Fritos, right?
exactly.
This is good. Little inside story on Jerry Jones. We're leaving the press box after the Dallas game here. The man
That's
is
right.
walking. He's walking out of it. It's late too. It's late at night. He's got a little glass of brown liquor. I'm sure the brown liquor costs more than I make in a week. But anyway, with a couple ice cubes and a bag of Fritos, and I see Jerry Jones, and I just look at him. Kind of nod as safe travels home, and he looks and goes, "Just enjoying me a bag of Fritos." That just stuck with me. Anyway, completely aside from what we were talking about, but
That was
any
last year, right?
chance that was this year after the game this year, just enjoying me a bag of Fritos. So good
That
times.
was it. I forgot. That was the Thanksgiving game?
No, up here. It was up here at the MetLife press box.
Oh, okay. Yes. That was so, that was, the Giants swept by the Cowboys ultimately. And I don't know, maybe Jerry, they win the Super Bowl, he's going to have a truckload of Fritos.
And as many Fritos as the man wants.
They're
Absolutely.
going all.
But
I mean, it makes sense why they would go all in and push for Odell Beckham. And yeah, I agree. I think it just doesn't make sense for the Giants. We'll see. Odell Beckham's supposed to make his decision middle of this week, so even he's not going to play this week regardless of where he signs. So what are you going to get out of him the rest of the year? And it's not, as we said, just about this year. It's about next year too. So I just don't see a situation where it's a kind of a long shot too that he'd be able to help the Cowboys this year, coming off that injury and the timing of it.
I mean, they don't. It's not like I watched that game against the Colts. It's not like they need another. I mean, they're loaded at receiver. I don't know. I don't get it. They've got guys beyond. I mean, they've got guys. It's just I don't know. That doesn't make any sense. But certainly, they're a win now team. It makes more sense than the Giants to me.
For sure. And in terms of winning now, the Cowboys are in, great position with 9 wins, and they have the tiebreaker over the Giants, but the Giants having half a win there kind of throws the tiebreaker thing out the window. The Giants do lose the tiebreaker to Seattle, to the Lions, but again, those teams don't have a tie. The Washington game is massive coming up.
Yeah. That's the entire season, I think. I mean,
That's
this team should beat the Colts. I mean, watching that Jeff Saturday, that's really, if you can't beat the Colts the way they look, the way they've kind of punted on the year, then you don't belong in the playoffs. So I'm going to give them the win there. And then you look at the other 4. I mean, 2 against the Eagles at Minneapolis. That's a tough place to play, as the Jets found out last week. Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to that game at Washington that they've proven that they're even with that team. If they can beat the Commanders, well, then yeah, I think 9 gets you in, especially with the tie. So that to me is the entire season at this point.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, that's the reason why the NFL put that game on Sunday night on the 18th of December. And I probably would have thought 9, perhaps 9-8 gets you in anyway. But the way to look at it, if you're just looking at the standings, is a tie is half a win when you're calculating the winning percentage, and that's obviously how they determine is winning percentage, right? So 9.5, I think, definitely gets you in. And so where does that other win come from? And I think the Washington game is the game to look at here. I mean, I guess you probably can assume the win over the Colts, like you said. So it's been an expectations defying Giant season, but perhaps they've regressed to the mean a little bit here, but they gave themselves quite a bit of wiggle room with a 6-1 start. And 1-3-1 certainly doesn't spell disaster like, say, 1-4 would have if they lost that game to the Commanders. And man, that would have been an absolutely brutal loss. But just in terms of this Eagles game, we can get to our pick at the end, but obviously, let's not overlook it. I mean, it's an important game. The Giants are going to try to win it. Before we get to our specific picks, like how do we size up their chances here in this game against a team that just looks like freaking unreal?
Yeah, I mean it's tough, and I just keep on thinking that the Eagles have to have a bad week, and I guess they lost to the Commanders 4 weeks ago. But overall, just watching them, I mean, against a good Tennessee team, playoff bound probably Tennessee team, 35-10. I mean, they're just impressive, and the amount of points they're scoring. I mean, Jalen Hurts looks like he probably won't win. He should be a candidate for the MVP. I mean, it's just a tough matchup to see. And again, when you look at the Giants, right, they have not scored 30 points in many 40 games, as we mentioned. All right, how do you beat the Eagles then? You've got to find a way to stop them. And so far this year, very few teams have been able to do that.
For all of the praise Wink Martindale's gotten, and yeah, he's working with some limited pieces. And the red zone defense has been very good. The Giants on a play-in, play-out basis, this has not been a very good Giants defense. And now they're going to play a buzzsaw offense with a quarterback who's got 20 touchdowns and 3 picks and a 108.3 quarterback rating this year. And you look at the last, goodness gracious, you could go back to like their Dallas game in week 6. I mean, this kid has just lit it up. I mean, you go down the quarterback ratings even 104, 140, 128, 94, 107, 96, 130. I mean, he's playing out of his mind, and he's got a couple of ridiculous receivers in A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. A.J. Brown just completely sliced and diced his whole team on Sunday, 119 and 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
So this is going to be a huge challenge for the Giants. I don't know. I don't see any way that they do. I mean, Howie Roseman's done a remarkable job of putting this team together.
He has. Yeah. And it would make a difference for the Giants, I think, or maybe Xavier McKinney will be back this week, and certainly having him in the secondary would have made a difference the way the Giants pressured the Commanders. If they had him at safety, maybe it would make a difference. It would be great if Adoree Jackson were healthy and you could count on having him in the secondary to defend A.J. Brown, some of those weapons they have. But yeah, it's just, again, you keep on forgetting that as banged up as many injuries as the Giants have had offensively. Well, they've probably lost 2 of their 4 most important defensive players,
For sure.
And now Leo Williams. I mean, it's just interesting. It's just an interesting situation where they've got Wink Martindale's going to make up for again and a team that doesn't have a lot of depth. So yeah, this is a tough time for this matchup.
Absolutely, I don't think Adoree Jackson comes back this week. He's got a sprained MCL. So I'm trying to think how many games he's missed, but I would probably think maybe one more for him, just because of the time. I mean, again, they put him on punt return. Like, what a silly decision. He's only missed 2 games. He got hurt on November 20th against the Lions. So I'm thinking probably one more game for Adoree Jackson, which we've seen like mixed results from these guys that the Giants are trotting out there as their new number 2 corner. Nick McLeod, Rodarius Williams. Not ideal. But Xavier McKinney, he can come back this week, technically off the non-football injury list. I talked to him after the game, and we wrote a little something on it for the next morning, and he expressed some, I think, cautious optimism. Just reading between the lines and reading what he said, I don't know if it's going to be this week, because he was saying after the game, like, oh yeah, I could put a club cast on my hand and play with that. And then Brian Dable was asked about that yesterday and said, is the club a possibility for him? And he said, no, not at this time, which I thought was odd, which to me means he's not going to play this week, because Xavier McKinney said, when I come back to play, I will not be 100%. I said, okay, well, that means you're going to have to wear something on your hand. And then the coach comes out the next day and says that that's not happening. To me, that means he's not coming back this week.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. And that's another bad sign. Yeah. And I wonder how much of that is, well, he's not for if he's not completely ready, don't rush him back for the Eagles when, as we've spoken before, the Commanders game later or these games against Minnesota might be more winnable. But yeah, again, just a depleted team facing a good offense. That's not a good situation. And especially with the way, I mean, we haven't even mentioned it yet, but just forget how good Jalen Hurts has been passing the ball. He's got 609 rushing yards, 4.6 average, 9 touchdowns on the ground. So that's another facet of this game that, that the Giants have to defend.
It's been an MVP level season, regardless of whether he wins it or not. If he's in the conversation and they win the Super Bowl or make the Super Bowl, I don't think Eagles fans care whether he wins the MVP, but he's certainly deserving of being in the conversation. There's no doubt about that. So I don't know. Did we miss anything before we get to picks? Anything that you want to mention before we get to our picks here?
I think we've covered it pretty well. Yeah, if you would have signed this, I come back to this a lot. Like someone said that I was too negative in my column after the game, and they make a good point. I mean, you would have signed for 7-4-1 at this point. I mean, there's not even with the 7 and I get it. The good start. You would think that the team had a chance to be 10 11 wins, but they're going to finally. I mean, this team lost 10 double-digit games the last 5 years. I mean, they're going to break that streak. They're no matter what happens, even if they lose out. So yeah, you still have to keep it in perspective that what they're doing is ahead of schedule, overachieving. Lots of positive signs just for the culture in general and for what Brian Dable's done on the sidelines. He did not have a good game against Washington, and that's the NFL. But yeah, I think in the big picture, if you're looking at that, the Giants are still in a much better place than we thought they'd be.
For sure. But I think the way the trajectory of the season sort of changed expectations and changed the standard, like he changed the standard so quickly, with a 6-1 start, then fans are with all these WinStar fans who've endured not only 5 straight playoffless seasons, but 5 straight seasons where they're the worst team in the NFL.
Disastrous seasons, yeah.
17 to 21, 2017, 2021, the worst team in the NFL. And so then it becomes like, okay, let's go, if it's there, let's go get this playoff berth. And so I think it would be different if they had like kind of an average start and then they won a few games and then the narrative becomes like that, a young team developing, but that's kind of gone out the window. I mean, now the roster hasn't changed and the attrition stuff hasn't changed. And if anything, it's gotten worse. So, I guess you could make that argument, like, they're in good position, they're fortunate to be here. But that's not how they're looking at it within their building. They want to go get this playoff berth. And like we said, they have a reasonable chance. If you give them that Colts win, then it all comes down to the Commanders game. But first, the Eagles on Sunday. I don't think the Giants win this game. I think they'll lose it. I just filed my pick actually earlier. I'll say Eagles 38, Giants 20. The Eagles are just so much stronger on both sides of the ball.
What did you think? So before I make this, it's a 6.5. Eagles are favored by 6.5 points. So Vegas thinks this is much closer than you're thinking it's going to be.
Wow, I didn't realize it was that close.
That's right. I was surprised by that too. And every time I see a line that I'm like, all right, well, wait, I thought that was going to be 10 and it's only 6.5. My first instinct is to think, well, this is going to be a closer game than I think it was going to be. And even with 6.5, I think it's going to be a touchdown game. I mean, let's say Eagles 27, Giants 20, so they'll still cover, but maybe a closer game than you think. And I go back to their resiliency. I think that playing on the road, I mean, it is a different task. I don't know. I think the Giants will be at their best in front of the home crowd, but it still won't be enough.
Yeah, this is a tough one. I mean, like at all levels of football, you can X and O all you want, and it comes down basically to the Jimmies and the Joes, and there is not there's just such a wide talent gap, and this is where the Giants are trying to get to. They're trying to get to where the Eagles are in terms of talent acquisition and a complete roster. And that's not something Joe Chain can tackle next offseason. And obviously, the bigger question hovering over that is like, do the Giants have their quarterback? And these next 5 games, regardless of whether the Giants make the playoffs, will go a long way toward answering that. And we'll see. So we'll see what happens Sunday. Bob will be back with us Sunday covering the game. You'll be there, obviously, too.
Absolutely.
It'll be a really interesting game, and we appreciate everybody joining us. Have a great week, and we will be back here with you guys next week. Take care.